Greetings, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad you're here. Thanks for tuning in. Tonight, we'll be reading Negro Culture in West Africa by George Washington Ellis. George Washington Ellis was trained as an attorney, writer, and was a speaker in his time. He was also sent to Liberia as one of several ministers who were writers like himself that were sent to the areas who were sent by the United States to areas of Latin America, Europe, Asia, and Africa between 1869 and the 1930s. Their writing and work on international diplomacy helped shape how the U.S. approached racial diplomacy. At the conclusion of his assignment in Liberia, which he was assigned there from 1902 until 1910, Ellis returned to the United States and opened a law office in Chicago, Illinois. He wrote several publications and served as an editor of the Journal of Race Development, which is thought to have been a eugenics-based magazine, but it had a lot of different types of information in it. The introduction to this work is written by Frederick Starr, who was key in whitewashing all of the acts of King Leopold in the Congo Free State. Introduction. Negro culture in West Africa needs no word of praise from my pen. It stands fairly upon its own merits, but its appearance justifies a brief introduction. However uncertain many of the teachings of ethnology in regard to Africa may be, we may quite sharply distinguish two masses among its dark peoples: the Bantu peoples in the south and the true Negroes further north. The division is based primarily upon language, but it is well borne out by physical type and by culture. The people to whom Mr. Ellis introduces us are representative of the true Negroes of West Africa. What he tells us regarding them will be true, for the most part, of all the populations lying to the south of the Great Desert and north of the Congo Basin and stretching across the continent from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean. The special population which he has studied is the Vai, lying in the neighborhood of Cape Mount and occupying a considerable area stretching back to the hinterland. They are by no means a decadent folk. They are vigorous, energetic, enterprising. Not only are they physically splendid, they are a shrewd and acute in mind. They are the Mohammedans, and that means that they are independent, even aggressive in attitude. It is unnecessary for me to sketch their character and life. Mr. Ellis treats both in detail. But we may say that no people on the west coast of Africa can better be taken as typical of showing what the African can do, either when left to himself or when affected by outside influences. It is among the Vai that the only practical and actually used script for the writing of an African Negro language has been produced. Mr. Ellis tells us of it and of its inventor, Dualu Bukari. The name of this Negro Cadmus deserves to be remembered, and from a people which produces such a man, something is justly expected in the present and in the future. So far as the present is concerned, the Vai population includes a plenty of shrewd, intelligent, industrious, and useful men. It is new to most of the readers of this book that there are Vai native Africans of pure blood who possess libraries of Arabic books touching upon a considerable range of subjects. Among the Vai are men like Mamadou Massaquoi, who are useful alike to their own people and to the Americo-Liberians. His experiment, of preparing textbooks in Bai printed by Dualo Bukari's script will be watched with interest. From among the boys of his people, many may be stimulated by the study of books in their own language and script to strive for high achievement. To the Bai, the Honorable J.B. McCready, President Mayor of the city of Monrovia, traces his blood and unquestioned ability. The Bai are chiefly a Liberian population. There are many tribes of natives in the Republic differing from each other in language, in character, and life. They may be rather readily divided into three groups. There are A, the pagan people in the interior, in large part hardly affected by the outside world, almost ignorant that there is an outside world. B, the Kru tribes of the coast who know the white man, are ambitious and energetic. They are pagans or Christian converts from paganism. And C, the Bai, Mandingo, and the like, Mohammedans, independent and very enterprising traders by instinct. These three groups present three quite different problems to the government of the Liberian Republic. Far outnumbering the Americo-Liberians, better adapted to their surroundings, they must be utilized and assimilated or they will destroy. Properly utilized, they will become the strength and bulwark of the nation. The group which presses and must most immediately play a significant part in Liberian affairs is that which includes the Bai. There are writers who demand that Liberia produce an actual African state. Delafosse, who, as French consul, lived in Monrovia and well knows the native populations, criticizes the Liberians for too closely copying us. He believes that they should have developed the native culture, have founded a Negro nation different from the European types. His demand is unreasonable, impossible of realization. The story of Liberia's origin demonstrates the impossibility. Liberia had to repeat us, even in our errors, because she came from us, is of us. Had she tried to do what Delafosse suggests, she would long since have been suppressed by a hostile and jealous European power. They would not permit such a nation to continue for a year upon the coast of West Africa. Liberia must play the game as other nations, white nations, play it or get off the board. Yet the Republic would be better off and stronger if she learns some lessons of the natives, if she took some hints from them, if she absorbed and cultivated some things they have developed. Among all her natives, there are none superior to the Bai. If Liberia cultivates close and intimate relations with them, she must perforce be tinctured by them. Their social life and culture will affect her. There should be a vitality and helpfulness in the contract. In closing, may I not say two words about our author, Mr. Ellis? Mr. Ellis was 8 years in Liberia as Secretary of the American Legation to Monrovia. He was a faithful and competent official giving good service. He has been useful to Liberia since his return, and his thoughtful and valuable articles regarding Liberian conditions and affairs have done much to keep American interests alive regarding the only republic in Africa. During the period of his service in Africa, Mr. Ellis found time and occasion to pursue the studies, the results of which are here presented. Consuls and diplomatic officers have exceptional opportunities to enrich our knowledge of other lands and people. Many such officials, British, French, German, Russian, have made important contributions of that sort. American officials who have done so are surprisingly few. Mr. Ellis sets an example that is worthy of wide imitation. Mr. Ellis is the third colored man to make conspicuous contribution to the knowledge of conditions and peoples of the Liberian region. The name of Edward W. Blyden is known everywhere. His views upon social, political, religious, and race matters of West Africa command respect. His Christianity, Islam, and the Negro race startled and instructed. Alexander Crummell did a great work as a man and educator in two continents. His Future of Africa and Africa and American will long be read with profit and delight. Neither of them have gone quite into the field which Mr. Ellis enters, but his Negro culture in West Africa deserves a place upon our shelves alongside of the well-known books of those famous men. As a scientific investigation, as a contribution to social problems, as a basis for political action, it has a definite mission. Signed, Frederick Starr, Chicago, June 20th, 1914. Preface, written by the author. The view entertained of the Negro African abroad is largely conditioned upon the knowledge possessed of the Negro in Africa. In this thought, then, the present study may have been some bearing upon the interracial understanding between what is considered the two most divergent and dissimilar ethnic groups. The writer of the present volume went to West Africa to study the Negro African and his social conditions with Minister J.R.A. Crossland, who was appointed American Minister Resident and Consul General to the Republic of Liberia in December of 1901, and continued his studies for 9 years until about May of 1910, when he finally returned to the United States. During the administration of Minister Ernest Lyon, which began in July of 1903, the American legation at Monrovia, Liberia, took more interest in Native affairs, perhaps more than had ever been taken before. Besides my special studies, numerous official trips were taken into the far interior under instructions from Washington to report upon the various tribes and the facts surrounding the interior Anglo and Franco-Liberian boundaries. So he was spying on them. From the Mano River on the northwest to the Kavala on the southeast, so that on numerous occasions, private studies coincided with official duties. After going over much of the literature on West Africa and making some studies of the Dey, Gola, Kwepesi, Bassa, Gribo, Kru, Mende, Kondo, Gabandi, Mandingo, Bai, and other West African tribes, the conclusion was reached that the field was so large and the work so difficult that in order to think of accomplishing anything worthwhile, it was necessary to select some particular group as a key to the African social situation and to examine it as exhaustively as possible. So he had to narrow it down. The Bai were chosen because they belonged to the Mandi family, one of the most important and representative of the many ethnic divisions of the African Black Belt, numbering among its members the Landahogo, Kando, Gabandi, Mende, Soso, Bambara, Mandingo, and Vai speaking peoples. In addition to what obtained in the character and culture of other tribes, the Vai had a written national orthography, invented independently by themselves, and besides Arabic, used by their upper and lettered classes. The writer employed Vai scholars to instruct him in the Vai language and at times, not occupied with his official duties as Secretary of Legation or charged the affairs ad interim, he visited the Vai people, traveling across their country during the different expressions of their social activities, cultivated the most intimate acquaintance in frequent conferences with Vai savants and elders, secured specimens of their arts representative of the various phases of their social life and deposited them in the National Museum at Washington, D.C., what we would now call the Smithsonian. He also collected proverbs and folklore during the 9 years. He embodied the results of his studies and interpretations of Vai data into a manuscript under the title of Negro Culture in West Africa. Having taken courses in economics and sociology and philosophy and psychology, the writer began his study chiefly to extend his information along sociological lines. But the work soon became so engrossing that he was carried beyond his original intentions. Much of the information which he had obtained concerning the Negro in Africa, found in encyclopedias, geographies, and works on ethnology and anthropology, was disclosed to be unsupported by the facts, as well as the general picture of the intellectual and social condition of the Negro in Africa. So they lie about us in these older books, which has been so deeply impressed upon the outside world. His studies in West Africa revealed a Negro substantially different to what, for the most part, is described in modern science and literature: scientific racism. Science had hitherto, in the main, been compelled to rely upon the reports and data supplied by transient travelers and resident visitors who little understood African mentality, institutions, and society. But with the partition of Africa by European powers, there came into existence an increasing body of European administrators and capable resident students who began to describe the world of the Negro African something more like what he really is, as an eminent and necessary as are the important services rendered to science and the Negro by such distinguished Caucasian writers, such as Sir Harry S. Johnston, Sir A.B. Ellis, Mary H. Kingsley, Lady Lugard, Dr. J. Scott Kelty, Count de Caudy, E.D. Morel, Dr. Robert H. Nassau, and M. Felix Du Bois, which were all racist writers for the most part. To the present writer, it seems more necessary and imperative that the Negro should explain his own culture and interpret his own thought and soul life if the complete truth is to be given to the other races of the earth. So you cannot trust white people to interpret what they see Black people doing. Blyden, Hayford, and Sabar have blazed the way in West Africa. In Europe, Tanner, Pushkin, and Coleridge Taylor have taken their rank among the celebrities by painting poetry and music, while in America, Du Bois, Dunbar, Ferris, Miller, and Washington have indicated in literature and education the services which the Negro everywhere must render to himself and the Caucasian if he is to contribute his proper portion toward the ultimate concord and cooperation of the races in the great upward trend of social progress. So, if we're supposed to do our part, these are people we need to study. Should there be any justification, therefore, for the publication of the following manuscript, it is thought to be rather the principle for which it stands than in the pride and glory of achievement. The writer wishes to acknowledge his grateful thanks and appreciation to the members of the Kansas congressional delegation, and especially to the Honorables Charles F. Scott, Charles Curtis, Chester I. Long, and J.D. Bowerstock for their continuous encouragement and support while on the field. For the high consideration and favor of Professor Frederick Starr in writing the introduction, he is particularly grateful and gratified, not only because Professor Starr is eminent as a scholar and anthropologist, but because of his travels in West Africa and his special knowledge of interior and tribal conditions in Liberian and Sierra Leone hinterlands. He wishes finally to acknowledge his indebtedness to the numerous Vi and West African Negro scholars and thinkers who contributed toward the work of the present volume, and above them all, his noted teacher and friend, Morimu Duclé, George Ellis, Chicago, Illinois, June 18, 1914. He had to thank the white people to get published. Just keep that in mind, because he came back from his experience in Liberia and opened up a law practice. He got out of politics. He stopped reporting on us. Negro Culture in West Africa, Chapter 1. The relation of the Vi to the Negro. The Vi is one of the most interesting tribes in all Africa. It would be interesting if for no other reason than that of the millions of Negroes of innumerable tribes, it has the distinction of being the only one that has a national orthography. Ethnologically, the Vais belong to the Mandi branch of the Negro race. They are very closely related to the Soso, Bambara, and Mandingo peoples, and like them, they speak a branch of the Mande tongue. This family of the Negro race occupies the western part of High Sudan between the 8th and 16th degrees of northern latitude and extending as far east as Timbuktu. Between Senegambia and Cape Palmas, a narrow strip of lowland separates High Sudan at the Atlantic. The Mandi family extends into the lowland only at 2 points. One is in the Mandi territory, the other is in the country of the Vai. The tribes of this lowland speak varied languages, entirely different from Mandi, the Mandi among them, which might be mentioned, the Bassa, Kwapesi, Kirim, Nwalu, Fulip, Timne, Baga, Balanta, Wulam, and others. The Vai country, a portion of the Great Negro Land. The Vai country is a portion of the Great Negro Land, which is inhabited by an estimated population of more than 30 million Negroes. This Negro land was known among ancient geographers by different names, sometimes as Sudan, Ethiopia, Negretia, and Takor, but more generally as Genoa, from which we have derived the word Guinea. The land of the blacks, now generally known as the Sudan, is a broad strip of territory between the 7th and 17th parallels, north latitude extending across the African continent from the Atlantic to the southern mouth of the Red Sea, and marked by a water belt of rivers and lakes from the Senegal to the sources of the Nile. Along the northern limits of the Sudan is the Great Desert of Sahara, beyond which lies the fertile strip along the Mediterranean occupied by the Berber states. Connecting this fertile land of the north and the Negro belt is the Valley of the Nile, which suggests the possible influences long exercised upon the Negro peoples. Outside influences upon Negro land. The land of the blacks was influenced by two great forces, one from Egypt and the other from the Arabs who conquered Spain, which met each other in what is now known as Nigeria. In this vicinity, the practice of embalming the dead was practiced until early in modern times. The eastern end of Negro land has the alphabet of Egypt and Arabia, while the western has that of Morocco. The decorative art of the Hausa states bears a strong resemblance to that of Egypt. The town of Burum had a tradition, at the time it was visited by Dr. Barth, that it had once been the habitation of the pharaohs, and an Arab writer by the name of S. Sardi, in his History of the Sudan, states that Kuka was at one time under the pharaohs. We know that the Phoenicians settled in North Africa and, keeping in close touch with Egypt, carried their conquest as far south as Senegal, where they set up a kingdom over which S. Sardi states that had 22 white kings reigned before the Hagera. Several nations, among which were the Persians, Greeks, Romans, and Arabs, in turn conquered Egypt and pressed upon the occupants of the northern states. Remember that settler colonialism is how they sneak in. They come wanting to do business, they come wanting to trade with you, and then they socially and sexually integrate into the highest offices of power. The result of all this pressure upon the white people of that fertile strip that fringed northern Africa was that many of these people were driven into the desert and later pressed upon the Negro peoples of Sudan. These outside influences had two main roads across the desert, one through Tripoli and one through Morocco, and through them poured all those Egyptian and Arabic forces that gave rise to these powerful Negro kingdoms in the Sudan, known as Ghana, Mele, Songhai, Hausa, and Bornu kingdoms. Being rich in amber, gums, skins, cotton, gold, and other raw materials, for 800 years they flourished in turn, and with Europe and Asia carried on extensive trade across the desert waste. They were very powerful, and some of them had a standing army of upward of 200,000 soldiers with 40,000 picked archers. To Ghana were tributary 20 Negro kingdoms and the white Berber state of Adagost. Some of the kings, possessing two capitals and living in fortified castles, that had glass windows and were decorated with sculptures and paintings, had pageantries of the most stately magnificence. So when they tell you that everybody was living in a mud hut, they're lying. Indeed, when England, Germany, and France were just emerging from barbarism in intellectual, scientific, industrial, and political development, some of these dynasties had attained a comparatively high degree of civilization. And geographers and historians mention Ghana, Timbuktu, and other interior towns as the resorts for the rich, the learned, and the pious of all countries. Just as the white Africans of the Fertile Strip of the North pressed upon and influenced the Negroes along the belt of Negroland, so the Negroes, thus influenced, pressed upon the Negroes toward the coast and south and gave to many of them a great deal that they themselves had received through Arabic and Egyptian channels. So there is no such thing as a white African. Those were the Dutch, but he didn't know that. And as they were encroaching upon one set of the elite Negroes, they just pressed down onto the less elite people. As only could be expected, the finer Negro tribes are those that inhabit the northern portions of the Great Sudan. And even to this day, their teachers and scholars are influencing the pagan tribes nearer the coast. The Vai tribe is one of the few tribes that has pressed to the coast with evidences that it had been very much influenced by the finer Negroes of the interior, especially in the matter of religious faith. The origin of the Vai. Whence came the Vai is a question to which I have received no conclusive answer. It is hardly probable that they have always remained on the coast where they are now, in a country that extends from the coast several days' walk into the interior, and from about 15 or 20 miles north of Monrovia, near Little Cape Mount, stretching northward and including the Galenas. It was the latter section that Reverend Coel was informed in 1851 that about 20 years before that time, the Spanish slave traders had instigated the chiefs of the Vai to increase their territory to the limits then existing. So they were egged on by outsiders. In the interesting little book entitled From the Darkness of Africa to the Light of America, published about 1890, Mr. Thomas E. Besselow, a Vai Prince, then a student at the Wesleyan Academy, Wilbraham, Massachusetts, and now living at Grand Cape Mount, Liberia, gives the following account of the origin of the Vai. More than 2 centuries ago, a nomad tribe, numbering hundreds of men and women, left Abyssinia and for many years wandered toward the country west of the central part of Africa, like the Helvetians in the time of Caesar. At last they arrived at a pleasant territory a little northeast of what is now the Republic of Liberia, and being pleased with the lay of the land, concluded to make it their home and cease their wandering. This country was already occupied by a powerful tribe called the Gora. Mr. Besselow informs his reader that his mother told him this origin of the Vai, and he makes no attempt to prove that they came from Abyssinia only about 200 years before. Later, he gives as a reason for their long journey westward that he had heard it said that it was to escape the iron rule of a tyrannical ruler. But it is hardly probable that a tribe so small as the Vai made such a long journey through powerful states without being reduced to bondage. And it would have been very difficult for the Vai to reach their present abode without passing through the great Borneo and Hausa kingdoms. Moreover, there is nothing pointed out in the language institutions and ethnography of the Vais and Abyssinians to even suggest an assumption of a common origin. And in view of the ethnological relation of the Vai to the Mandingos, Bambaras, and other tribes, to none which any reference has been made, at least for the present, the theory of the Abyssinian origin of the Vais must be regarded as highly improbable. So he's dismissing their origin story. Greetings, forecast. Thanks for tuning in. The Reverend Coley, who visited the Vai country about 1850 and wrote a Vai grammar, gives as his opinion that the Vai came from the interior. This belief he based on the fact that on the north and south of the Vai lived people who spoke entirely different languages from theirs. The Kirim was spoken on the north, and the relics of the Duai on the south, and other tribes have pushed to the coast to secure commercial advantages thereof. Moreover, he found a tradition among the Vai people themselves that they emigrated from a district of the Mandi country. He thought that this emigration had taken place about 200 years before 1851, and on account of the changes in language, but not later than 100 years, allowing for language differences that might have existed before the immigration. He thought also that the Mandis, who, tradition says, were under the command of the Fabule and the Kiatamba, not only took the country, but adopted the name of the conquered people. From what I learned in a trip across a portion of the Vai country, I think that the opinion expressed by Reverend Powell is highly probable. So he agreed with the white folks. At Grand Cape Mount, there is also a lake called Peso, extending 25 or 30 miles into the interior, and I went to the end of it, stopping at the important towns, among which were the Datia mentioned by Reverend Coley. And after a few days' journey into the interior, I walked about 100 miles across the Vai country to Monrovia. I was informed by numerous chiefs that the Vai came from the Mandingo country under the leadership not only of the Fabule and Kiatamba, but of Cassiel and Manoba, his son. A story told to me to the effect that a Mandingo king of Musardo had a son who broke a law which, according to custom, forfeited his life, and that his father, who dearly loved him, saved his life, escaped with him and a number of his followers who made their way to the Tigya country and founded the Vai tribe. From this tradition, it seems that Vai was not the name of the country subdued, as was suggested by Reverend Coley. Yet, in essential points, the traditions mentioned by him and the one told to me agree, except that the latter is somewhat more explicit. Whether it be true or not, it has the merit of being both possible and probable. So that is how the Vi began, allegedly. Chapter 2. Some physical aspects of the Vi: personal features, size, color, eyes, and hair. The Vi are generally known to possess fairly good personal features, some of the men being handsome, splendid in physique, and intelligent in bearing. They have neither the strength and physical endurance of the Coquisi nor the stalwart frames of the Crews, yet they are not pygmies but medium in size. The women are attractively developed and possess charms above all their sisters of the Gora, Kupesi, Bandi, Bassa, Beri, Kru, and other Liberian tribes. So they're pretty women. And some of them are very beautiful. At Datia, I saw a young maid of 17 who was so pleasing in her personal appearance that because of her beauty, she was without a doubt the belle of that town. She had just come from Grigri Bush and was said to be betrothed to the son of the chief. There were many good-looking Bai girls and women, which goes to show that personal beauty is a thing monopolized by no particular people. In the in color, the Bais range from dark olive to coal black. The skin of the better classes of the Bai is smooth and velvety, while that of the lower classes is somewhat coarse and rough. On some of them, I examined the skin that had been exposed to the sun and that had not been so exposed. The parts affected by the sun seemed darker and less oily than the unexposed portions. And under the clothes of some of them, I noticed little spots that were lighter in color. The body of the lower classes is almost entirely unclad, so only a portion of the thigh and under the arm could I find places not habitually exposed to the sun. And the skin under the clothes is soft and oily in appearance and much lighter than in other places. Persons black in the face were brown in unexposed portions of the body or arm because they tanned, because they were exposed to the sun. The feet, being exposed to the weather, are often positively sooty and rough, yet the small, neat, smooth feet of many Vi naturally attracted attention and excitement and excited comment in the Vi country, and they may have seen any time in the Vi towns in the outer limits of Monrovia. The eyes of the Vi, so far as I have been able to observe, range from black-brown in color of the iris to dark hazel and what is called the neutral eye, the exact color of which cannot be distinguished at once. The position of the eyes in the head is similar to that of Europeans, the long axis being substantially in one horizontal plane. The eye is medium in size and usually has a frank and pleasant appearance. Now and then, among the Vi, one may see a Mongolian eye, which is compressed and outer angles, but this is very rare. The hair of the Vi differs very much in quality from the woolly and undulating and wavy. It is usually black in color, and the better quality is more generally observed among the women, some of whom have hair in abundance and of great beauty. The hair of infants is of a brownish color, sometimes very light, and grows darker as the child advances in years. As a general thing, the Vais have the hair uniformly distributed over the head, though the quantity possessed is usually moderate. The young men keep their hair cut very close, and the women have theirs long enough to be arranged according to their custom, which does not require it to be very long. The Vai men have some beard, but not a great deal, and many of them have hair on their breasts, while both sexes have it in their armpits and on their pubes. Baldness is not commonly observed among the Vai, though now and then one will see a very old man who is bald. The Vai and the Mandingos shave the heads of the boys and young men, and if this has been practiced for any length of time, it may be that this custom has had a tendency to strengthen the hair. The faces of the Vai are generally medium in size. Some of them are short and broad, while others are long and narrow. And now and then you will find one narrowing upward or up or toward the chin. The Vai have Negroid nose, but the openings are not so large, nor the nose so flat as in the case of the typical Negro. Among them, of course, may be found great varieties of noses, ranging between the Negroid and the straight. Some of them are as represented in the Negro type, but this is not the rule. The lips, like the nose of the Vai, are not as shown in the Negro type, but are medium in size with a slight turn to the upper and lower lips. And, notwithstanding their custom of going barefoot, their feet are usually fairly well shaped, and sometimes even noticeably small and well shaped. The accepted Negro type. The typical Negro is a rare variety even among Negroes, says Winwood Reed. I have found this strikingly true among the Vai. In fact, I have been able to see so little of the Negro type even among other tribes of West Africa that I have wondered how ethnologists with a modicum of information of any African tribe could ever have given to the world such a cruel misrepresentation as the embodied in the Negro type. Mr. Peschel calls them mistaken ethnologists and gives their opinion of the Negro in these words. The Negro was the ideal of everything barbarous and beast-like. They endeavored to deny him any capability of improvement and even disputed his position as a man. The Negro was said to have an oval skull, a flat forehead, snout-like jaws, swollen lips, a broad flat nose, short crimped hair, falsely called wool, long arms, meager thighs, and flat feet. No single tribe, however, possesses all these deformities. So what he's saying is Winwood Reed called them out for their scientific racism. At the time, this Negro type, so graphically described by Mr. Peschel, was sent forth with this seal of science and impressed upon the world. Great nations were robbing Africa of her sons and dooming them to pitiless lives of unrequited toil because they had this definition of a Negro, which meant Negroes were subhuman and they could then work them like beasts of burden. The consciences of kings and nations alike were lulled to sleep by the love and hope of gain. But human slavery was so cruel in itself, so repugnant to the natural rights of man, that its continuance in time necessitated the sanction and authority of science. As slavery grew and was extended, its evils grew and were multiplied. There was consequently then an ever increasing demand for ethnologists to create a Negro type that was false, barbarous, and beast-like, one that represented the Negro as incapable of all improvement, and which would strengthen the sentiment that sought to bar the Negro from the human race, scientific racism. It was not necessary to say that the type born of this slave sentiment fully met the demand, for it continued about all the deformities possible to a human being and has done incalculable harm to the Negro race. This false Negro type was set forth in encyclopedias, represented in geographies, and described in works of ethnology and other books with ethnic features. It would be as unjust to say that there were no Negroes corresponding to this type as it would be to contend that such creatures are typical of the race. For there are some Negroes in every tribe whom this type hardly represents. Every lover of the truth desires, and it is due to the Negro race, that his features, character, and institutions be truthfully represented. Until it has been proved that the majority of the Negro peoples conform to the present accepted Negro type, in the interest of truth and ethnological science, the false Negro type should be changed to conform to the simple facts. The tribes of Africa are being studied now as they have never been studied before. Since Miss Mary Kingsley ceased her valuable contributions to the studies of African peoples, many valuable books have been published concerning the life and institutions of African tribes, among which I might mention the works of Sir A.B. Ellis, E.D. Morel, Sir Harry Johnston, Casely Ford, John M. Sarba, a native African, and the many writings of Dr. Edward W. Blyden, the eminent writer and sage of West Africa. The African is gradually being represented to the world as he really is. Mr. Benjamin Kidd, a noted writer and author, says that the economic center of the world is slowly shifting toward the tropics. And as that economic center shifted toward the tropics, so did the exploitation of Africa. See Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. If this be true, interest in Africa and Africans will increase with the years, and it is only a question of time when, to harmonize with the truth, the accepted Negro type must be changed. Influences of climate in West Africa. West Africa has the reputation of having one of the worst, if not the worst, climate in the world. Since it acquired this reputation, however, many forces have been introduced for the improvement of West Africa, so that while the climate is still bad enough, it is hardly as bad as it is reputed to be. You will find in the encyclopedias that West Africa is still referred to as the white man's grave. There is no doubt that the climate of West Africa is very severe. It is no respecter of persons, and the African suffers as well as the people from the temperate zone. But having been accustomed to centuries of exposure, the African suffers less than do members of other races. The natural effect of the climate in West Africa is to enfeeble both the body and the intellect. Young men often come to West Africa strong and stalwart, but if they do not die, they soon find their health seriously impaired by malaria, which lurks in the wooded lowlands along the coast. A residence in West Africa necessitates taking medicine almost constantly, and then the man that takes it seems to fare little better than the rest. As you go interiorward, the climate becomes more healthful. Europeans have been unable as yet to colonize any great extent in West Africa, and the death rate is still high among those who go there for commercial or political considerations, though they seldom remain longer than a year, with a leave of 6 months on the continent. Among the natives, many diseases may be found that are apparently peculiar to them and the climate. And just as the climate of West Africa, so inimical to man, enfeebles the body, it preys upon the mind. Its effect upon the memory is so noticeably bad that you often hear persons apologizing for having acquired a West African memory. The effect upon the will is quite as well known as that upon the memory. Persons coming from abroad find Africa very slow. They have determined to do many things. They criticize everything and everybody and ask why Africans do not move about briskly. After having been in Africa for years, they find that their plans do not materialize. In a little while, they cease to criticize, and later they take on the African movement. There is something in the climate that makes any kind of work extremely irksome. In West Africa, the body loses its strength, the memory its retentiveness, and the will its energy. These are the efforts observed upon persons remaining in West Africa only for a short time, and they form a part of the experience of almost every person who has lived on the West Coast. White persons with beautiful skin, clear and soft, and with rosy cheeks. After they have been in West Africa for a while, some become dark and tawny like the inhabitants of southern Spain and Italy. Their black comes out because they're exposed to the sun. If we can detect these efforts of the West African climate in only a short time upon persons who come to the West Coast, what must have been the effect of such a climate upon the Negroes who for centuries have been exposed to its hardships? Decoration and dress. In his admirable essay on education, Mr. Herbert Spencer remarks that decoration always precedes dress. This truth is strikingly illustrated among the backward peoples, yet there is not a great deal of decorum used by the tribes of Liberia. The members of the Kru tribes have a tattooing on their faces, consisting of a blue mark in the center of the forehead running toward the nose, a blue triangle in each temple, and other marks on the arms. But the tendency thus to disfigure themselves is dying out. There is no decline in the use of clay, however, and it may be frequently seen in varied colors in Monrovia. Among the Bai, I noticed on the body of the boys who had been in the devil bush 2 stripes or rows tattooed down the back and around the waist to the side. These rows were not colored, but they were simple scars which had been made by cutting, so they used scarification. Girls from the Gree bush had also the small of the back rectangle artistically cut without coloring and in size about 3 inches by 8. Other than the foregoing on the persons of the Bai, I have seen no permanent marks. Decoration in the way of ornaments depends largely upon the wealth and standing of the wearer. The better class of men wear rings of silver or gold, silver and gold armlets and anklets, small deer horns ornamented with silver or gold, and various amulets of religious importance with gold and silver bands. Men of less means wear the same ornaments but of less costly material. I have noticed some with iron and copper and brass anklets. Boys generally go unclad until they are 10 or 11 years old, when, according to station, they wear a simple cloth tied about the loins or a short gown. The boys from the devil bush and the girls from the Gree bush, in honor of their coming out, wear various kinds of jewelry, beads, rings, horns, and silver breastplates. As a sign of virginity, the girls wear beads about the hips and a very small horn suspended from the neck containing medicine, which is said will kill any person who violates the person of the wearer. There are other signs too, but of whatever nature they may be, they are worn until marriage. White clay is used by the girls in the Gree bush, and those who are betrothed use brown clay, which is made from the fat of animals mixed with perfume and olives. There is a similar kind of clay which is usually worn by women at night and which is highly scented with the bark of a tree. I ascertained that clay is used among the Bai for 3 purposes: for decoration, for protection to the skin, and as a medicine. Women during pregnancy use it as a medicine, and I saw many of them with this clay spread thickly over the entire person. When used for the decorative purposes alone, different kinds are put on in artistic combinations. The ornaments of this, the ornaments of the king consist of his breastplate, rings, anklets, horns, and various armlets, all especially made for him. The king's ornaments are made of the best and most costly material to be had, and no one may wear any like his. In the matter of dress, the Vai and Mandingos wear much more than do most of the tribes in Liberia. The boys and girls wear little or nothing until they are 10 years old, so they run around naked. Afterwards, the girls wear an apron made of beads and the boys a breechcloth or gown. The boys and girls come out of the devil and gree bushes. They dress especially for the occasion. They have a full supply of clothes with shoes, hats, besides beads, horns, leopard teeth, and various kinds of jewelry. The boys wear a silver breastplate, and the slaves are permitted to wear only one shoe. So they had slaves in this culture. The men of the ordinary class among the Bai wear a cloth folded about over the breechcloth, while the gentlemen wear gowns or shirts and pants that are very loose and cut very much like those of the Chinamen. The quality of the goods varies with the taste and wealth of the wearers. The common woman wears two or more cloths folded about the waist, generally of country cloth or foreign made goods, according to native fashion or taste. The more wealthy woman wears better and more cloth, and in addition, a large silk handkerchief around the head and about the shoulders. Men of the best standing carry a whip on their shoulders as evidence thereof, and younger men have a custom of carrying as part of their dress a silk handkerchief to cover their shoulders. The Vai priests have a special dress which distinguishes them from the other people. They wear the best of clothes according to Vai customs: hats, shoes, and a long white gown with a long string of beads around the neck. There is a special dress for war. The common soldier wears a shirt and short pants, a leopard skin cap, and is armed with a gun or war knife, and a few have axes. Each one has a small bag containing medicine from the doctor who presages good by cutting sand on a leopard hide. The dress of the chiefs is made almost entirely of leopard skins. The cap, shirt, and pants have sewn on them little bags of medicine covered with red flannel. On the sides of the cap and on the sides and back of the leopard skin garments are rows of seashells. A strip of ram fur is sewed down the center and hangs down the back of the general's cap. Each chief wears a breastplate of silver containing medicine from the doctor, ranging in value from $25 to $100. So very expensive by that day because this was in 1910. The shoes of the king are made of the best leather, and his hats of the best cloth and grass. He has the finest gowns, pants, and country clothes made especially for him. In addition, he has garments made of skins of various animals, like the leopard, with the best native trimmings. The king's most attractive dress consists of his coronation robes of scarlet cloth and those which he selects to wear on ceremonial occasions, when he is attended by all his important chiefs and warriors. The king has the most costly breastplate, beautifully carved, with a compartment in the center for the god of defense and his country medicine. He has a full supply of all the weapons of war, carved and ornamented with the rarest native decorations and designs. So, as you can see, he found high civilization when he went into the hinterlands of Liberia and Sierra Leone. He went into the interior and found that it was necessary for him to document with his own African thought and his own African mind the things that he saw. Greetings, Mr. Plumtree and family. Good morning. Thank you for tuning in. So, as you can see, it was necessary for him to document what he saw because all the other things that were talked about were just lies. He had been told that these people were savages. When we look at what scientific racism was, it was the justification of treating us as a lower class of people so that they could continue to profit off of us. So they divide humankind into biologically separate groups with physical and mental characteristics, and they construct corresponding explanatory models such as race, racialism, race realism, and race science to support those ideas. So they make stuff up, as noted in the text earlier, saying the most beastly and ghastly things about us, putting those things into a category, saying this is what a typical Negro is, knowing that the Negro is not the ideal of everything barbarous and beast-like, but that's how they categorized us. And then they continue to deny us any capability of improvement or deny the fact that we had any capability of improvement. And once they continue to do that, they could treat us like beasts of burden. And that's what they continue to do. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. Hopefully, you're going to go listen to the debate. I will be back Thursday. I have a class that I'm taking, so our schedule is going to be a little off for the next few months. So I still haven't gotten the Kobe Cambone book. I'm waiting for it to come in. If you know a better supplier or someone that can get it quicker, please let me know. Leave me a message. I thank each and every one of you for listening. I know that Forecast is here and Mr. Plumtree and family are listening. I know that Raw and the elders are listening. I appreciate it. I know that Oni from the Pro-Black Perspective is listening. I know that Koku is listening. I know that Dorico Cooper is listening. I know Brother Bakari is listening. And all of you new listeners out there, I thank each and every one of you for tuning in. I value your input and your feedback. Please put comments. If you have any questions, we can talk about it. Hopefully you enjoyed this broadcast, and I will see you Thursday where we talk about the economic life of the Bai. Obviously, these were not a poor people, because if they could afford $25 to $100 in 1914 money, then they had the ability to really finance the uh they had the ability to really finance their different um expenses. $25 in 1910 would be worth $827 today, and $100 in 1910 would be worth, give me a moment, $3,311 today. So I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be here. I thank each and every one of you for listening, and I will see you soon. Peace, guys.